Cuba for us right now, where this storm is really developing. Patrick, be careful over there, but tell us what you can.
You know, just as the last time we talked, Wolf, the first major squall has come in, rain blowing sideways. We can no longer see the islands off the coast. It is really blowing here. I think it's just the beginning of this very powerful storm, Category 5, coming to this section of Cuba, and I think it's just the beginning of a very long night.
When we spoke just a little while ago, Patrick, it seemed relatively calm, pretty sunny, almost like a normal day, and all of a sudden this has developed. So what are they saying in Cuba right now? How much time do you have before the real hurricane develops? Because this is just the outer circle of it.
Yes, these are just the outer bands. We're not supposed to get the worst of it probably till early tomorrow morning. But all day long, they've been telling people here in the coastal areas of Cuba, this part of Cuba, that it could flood, that the wind is going to come like this, that it's going to be very strong, and that people need to evacuate, and that there will become a time where they will no longer be able to evacuate. That time has now come. You can't drive in this, you can't walk in this kind of weather, and it's just going to continue to deteriorate. So for people in Florida who are still on the fence, these are the beginning of the conditions that they will face. This is not the full force of the storm by any measure, because remember, the storm is passing by Cuba. It's not going to hit Cuba the way it's going to hit Florida, and I have to say, you know, it can almost knock you over. I'm leaning into the wind now, and a half an hour ago, there was almost clear skies, and we've seen this come in, it's blowing the trees. I can no longer see the water out there, and it's a very much changed situation, and it happened within the space of just a few minutes, Wolf.
Yeah, just a few minutes. Stand by, Patrick. Louis Uccellini, the director of the National Weather Service, is looking at the images that we're showing. When you see this going, this is just the beginning for the Cuban people.
That's correct. It's just the beginning, and they're on the south side of the storm. So it'll be the north side of the storm and then the east side of the storm as it makes the turn. That's actually going to be the worst part of the storm. So they're being brushed by the storm, and they're on the south side, not the worst part, and you see what's happening already.
Patrick, very quickly, there are millions of people over there potentially in harm's way in Cuba. Are they prepared for this? Have they evacuated? Are they in shelters?
So the Cuban government says that hundreds of thousands of people across this very long line have already evacuated. Tens of thousands of tourists were taken off the islands behind me, from the hotels there, the beaches, and taken to other parts of the island or to airports where they could fly home early to cut their vacation short. Other Cubans have gone to stay with relatives, have actually gone up into caves in the mountains. So everybody who was going to evacuate probably at this point has done so.
That's the same strength that devastated some Caribbean islands and killed at least 24 people. CNN's Leila Santiago has just landed in Antigua. Leila, you were in Barbuda just a little while ago, and an hour or so ago. Tell our viewers what you saw.
You know, Wolf, as we were flying in, we certainly saw devastation. We're going to show you aerials that we captured while we were coming into this once Caribbean tropical island surrounded by turquoise water. And then when you get on the ground, you not only see the devastation, you feel the desperation of the people there, people who are trying to still get out at this hour, actually, many of them evacuating to where we are right now in Antigua. You know, as we talked to the last few people still on the island of Barbuda, and we were asking them to just describe what Irma was like. One man described it like a lion roaring. Another person said it was a monster. And so now the question is, what will Jose do? What will Hurricane Jose do to that island and the people who have already lost so much? Most people left Barbuda with just one bag because their things were destroyed. Their homes were on the ground. Their lives just kind of scattered out onto the roads. If you could tell that some of them were roads, some of them were flooded. So, you know, when you see it, it is pure devastation. And this is among people who will tell you we are used to hurricanes, but we have never seen anything like this. And when I asked them, what do you tell someone right now in Irma's path, everyone immediately said, get out, get out now. They have certainly felt the wrath of Irma and are waiting to see what Jose will bring.
Yeah, Jose is the other hurricane that's moving apparently right towards Barbuda right now. The last thing they need, another hurricane as they try to do at least some recovery. Layla, good work. Thank you so much for reporting that. Those images are so stark, and a clear warning to all the folks in Florida as well. If you haven't evacuated, you still have a little time. Do it now. So what will Irma's devastating winds do to Miami, for example? If that city, it's a huge city, takes a direct hit. Let's go back to CNN's John Berman. He's on the scene for us. John, there are a lot of construction cranes dotting the city's skyline. What happens to them? Because potentially, if they collapse, that could be a huge danger.
It's a big fear here, Wolf. There are more than 20 of these cranes up around the city. It's a sign of the progress in Miami and just the booming economy here. There's a lot of construction going on. These cranes are designed to withstand 145-mile-an-hour winds. That is what we're told. The problem is, as you know, Irma's going to hit as a Category 5 storm somewhere in South Florida. That could bring winds of 155 miles an hour or higher. So that is above the threshold where these cranes really are safe. And one of the building officials here in Miami said, I would not advise staying in a building next to a crane. They're telling people, if you do live next to one of these cranes, get out, evacuate. They couldn't take them down. It takes 5 to 6 days to dismantle them, and they would be in the streets and they would just clog up the evacuation process. So that is why they are still standing. One particular note, the booms, you can see the arms up top. They can't tie them down. Why not? If they tied them down, it would serve like a sail and offer too much resistance and then pull everything down. So they're designed to swing like weather vanes, which can be awfully disconcerting if you can see it moving in the wind. We have some pictures from Puerto Rico. You can see one of these cranes swinging in the wind, and I think it scares a lot of people, but that is the way it's supposed to react. Again, if it gets higher than 145 miles an hour, it could be a real problem. And sometimes things just don't work out even when the wind speeds are lower than that. You'll remember during Superstorm Sandy, not even hurricane level winds in New York City, there was a crane that did partially come down. There were evacuations necessary. 900 people had to leave a building nearby in New York City. So you can see why people are watching these cranes so carefully.
Yeah, the higher you go, the more intense the wind as well. John Berman in Miami for us. Thanks so much for your reporting. Much more on the breaking news coming up. We'll be right back. Very latest.
So the very latest, Wolf, is that we are seeing at least a moderate increase in terms of gusts going from 185 miles per hour up to 190 miles per hour. Sustained winds are holding steady at 155, but I want you to understand 2 miles an hour stronger. If this was 157, that would be a Category 5. So even though we are just a Category 4 now, it is at the very top end of that Category 4 strength. You can see the storm continuing its trek in between the Bahamas and Cuba. This plays an important role because over land, the storm weakens, but it's over open water. This is where the storms like to be. This is where they can either maintain strength or get even stronger because of that warm water. We've also seen an increase. The swath of hurricane watches and warnings has expanded a little bit because we are getting closer to landfall time. And the closer and closer we get, the more these hurricane watches and warnings are going to spread further north into the state. So keep that in mind. Even if you see your county on the map and it's not under a hurricane watch or a warning as of right now, that could change as we get closer to landfall. Speaking of landfall, we expect that to be around sunrise, somewhere between overnight and sunrise Sunday morning. Again, depending on exactly where that landfall could end up being. It could be over the Keys. It could be around Key Largo. The exact point is still up in the air. However, we do know that it will end up making landfall over some portion of southern Florida and then continue the trek further off to the north. The good news is, as it pushes further north, it is expected to weaken. So the folks in northern Florida won't have to contend with quite as strong of winds as the folks in southern Florida. However, with that said, even 60, 70 miles per hour is a very high-end tropical storm. Places like Tampa, Orlando, you're still looking at, say, a Category 1 to a Category 2 strength hurricane as it makes over your particular locations. So that's going to be key. Basically, from the moment it makes landfall up until we get to, say, Daytona Beach, we still expect this storm to maintain hurricane strength, even though it will be weakening. Now, the strongest storm surge that we expect to get will be along the southern edge of the storm. We're talking, say, West Palm Beach down through Key West, could see storm surge of 5 to 10 feet. Naples on the western side down towards Key West could see as much as 6 to 12 feet. Okay, here's the thing. The average first story of a building is 10 feet tall. That means you could see entire homes' first stories submerged underwater because of the potential storm surge that we'll be dealing with this storm. You also, on the western side, you may be wondering why that number is a little bit higher than that on the eastern side. It's called shoaling. The drop off from the beach down into the deep ocean is not as deep on the western side as it is on the eastern side. That allows that water to be able to push in and go higher on the western side than it would on the eastern side. So keep that in mind too. Forecast intensity, because of the incredible scale of this storm, how big it is, it will likely take hurricane force winds from the east side of Florida to the west side of Florida. So it really doesn't matter which side of Florida you are on, east coast versus west coast, to determine who is going to have hurricane force winds and who won't. Both sides are likely going to have that. We've also, we've heard about comparisons to Andrew. So I want to kind of break that down for you. This is Andrew on the left. This is Irma on the right. Technically, Andrew is expected to be slightly stronger at landfall, 165 miles per hour. We're expecting Irma around 150. But it's the time over the state of Florida where the big difference is. Andrew only spent 4 hours from one side of the Florida to the other. Irma is expected to spend at least 30 hours over the state. And that's going to be the big concern because that's going to allow a lot of heavy rain to fall, which could cause flooding, storm surge, not to mention hours upon hours, Wolf, of those incredibly strong winds.
Allison Chinchar, meteorologist,
all eyes on Hurricane Irma. Still have that 2 p.m. advisory is the most recent. Current movement is to the west at 14 miles per hour or so. Maximum winds at 155 miles per hour. And you can see the eye of the storm is moving north of Cuba. Again, the strongest winds on the northeastern side of this storm. And as we show you the track, you can see continuing on that northwestward path, staying likely just north of Cuba as a Category 4 hurricane. And then we're still waiting on that turn to the north. That would be on Saturday. And depending on how soon or how late it turns north would depend on the track and the effects again here in Florida, like you've heard us talk about over and over again. The trend, unfortunately, the last 2 days has been a little bit farther to the west.
Irma slamming into South Florida as a Category 5 storm. Let's bring back the National Weather Service Director, Louis Uccellini. Louis, you got to give us some perspective on this. Folks are watching right now, and this is a historic moment.
You know, we've been here comparing this storm to Andrew. Andrew was 25 years ago. It was a smaller storm than we have here in terms of the size. We have a new generation of Floridians that haven't experienced anything like this. For those people in South Florida, they get hit with this storm. It's a powerful, dangerous, catastrophic storm. This will be their big one.
I want to show our viewers once again some of that drone video over Barbuda, which basically that whole island was destroyed. Look at these pictures. Is this what the people of parts of Florida should anticipate in the coming days?
This island got hit by the eye of the storm. Maximum winds, maximum power of that hurricane. Where this eye hits, as it is approaching southern Florida, and it does have the potential to re-intensify, you will see winds that can do this kind of damage to buildings that aren't, that might not be as structurally sound as other buildings. So what we're seeing here is the capacity of this storm to do this kind of damage. So people should take heed of the local officials and follow their instructions. So
the eye, the most dangerous part, where do you anticipate it will hit?
Right now we're predicting this eye to make landfall in the northern Keys at 160 miles an hour. And when that happens, that part of Florida and points north as this storm moves northward will create a destructive path. We've got strong winds, we've got potential tornadoes, we've got very heavy rains, and we've got the storm surge right along the coast. You got all of these catastrophic effects that will be maximized at landfall as it hits southern Florida.
You with the National Weather Service, you're working together with other federal, state, and local authorities right now.
Yes, and you're seeing the results of this consistency and message from all of these emergency managers working together. You're seeing the high technology that's come in from the NOAA satellite services. We've got people flying planes into the hurricane tonight, and we've got people standing by to check the ports in the ocean service. this has been a team effort, and I'm really proud of it, and I'm really proud of the National Weather Service.
We're grateful to all of you and the entire team. Louis, thank you very much. That's it for me. Thanks very much for watching. CNN's special breaking news coverage of Hurricane Irma continues right now with Aaron Burnett out front.
Out front next, breaking news, get out, it's happening. Hurricane Irma, a storm the size of Texas, heading for Florida. The latest forecast, Irma getting stronger. It will be a Category 5 as it crosses the Florida Keys. Let's go out front.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Good evening, I'm Aaron Burnett. Out front this evening, the breaking news. Impact. This is as real as it gets. Those are the exact words from the National Weather Service, warning people to get out of the way of Hurricane Irma now. The full message came out on Twitter. I read it in full. This is as real as it gets. Nowhere in the Florida Keys will be safe. You still have time to evacuate. The dire warning coming as Irma is projected to be a Category 5 storm with sustained winds of 160 miles an hour as it crosses the Florida Keys this weekend. The video that you see right now is a new video that we just got in a moment ago here out front. This is the destruction of the Caribbean island of Barbuda. The first images and one of the hardest hit areas so far by the storm. Just to give everyone in the path a sense of what could happen, why it is so crucial to evacuate. The storm is deadly. It is record-breaking, and it's about to get even stronger before it hits the United States. Residents at this hour are still trying to get out of harm's way. You see the shots there of the highways. It's a mass exodus, and it is one of the biggest in American history. Right now, it is the last call for people to flee. In just a matter of hours, it will be too late. And first responders are warning they will not be able to save anyone during the storm once it hits. The stunning image that you see right there is from the space station. It shows Irma, massive and terrifying, moving towards Florida, many times bigger than Hurricane Andrew was. Governor Rick Scott says all Floridians should be ready to leave. The window, though, he says, is closing.
I'm a dad and I'm a grandfather. I love my family. I can't imagine life without them. Do not put yourself or your family at risk. If you've been ordered to evacuate and are still home, please go to a shelter.
This is life or death. And Governor Scott's going to be out front updating us in just a couple of moments. At this hour, we're not only tracking Irma, we are watching Hurricane Jose, now a Category 4 storm right behind Irma in the Atlantic. We have reporters across Irma's reach, firsthand witnesses to the storm and its effects. We begin with Allison Chinchar in the CNN Weather Center. Allison, you're looking at the very latest models, the forecasts that are just coming in. And right now, is it fair to say, it is nearly certain southern Florida will be hit by this storm as a major catastrophic hurricane?
All of the models, Aaron, have really come together in the last several hours to make very clear what that track is going to be. And that track clearly includes Florida and in the short term. So here's what we know. As of the last advisory, several things have changed. For starters, wind gusts have now gone up from 185 to 190 miles per hour. The forward movement is now west at 12 miles per hour. This has slowed a little bit, but this is not uncommon. You often get a slower movement as it interacts with land, namely Cuba and the Bahamas right now. But the thing to note, it's sliding in between the two in some of the warmest waters in this area. That is exactly what every hurricane wants. Nice warm water. That is big fuel for these storms. And it's likely going to allow Irma to intensify over the next 24 hours. We expect it, as well as the National Hurricane Center, to increase up to around 160 mile per hour winds, which is a Category 5 storm as it crosses over the Florida Keys. Then as it goes over the main peninsula of Florida, likely a Category 4 storm, and then it quickly weakens as it makes its way to the north, but still likely to be awfully close to hurricane strength as it reaches over the Georgia state line. Storm surge is going to be one of the big factors with this storm. From West Palm Beach stretching down to Key West, we're looking at storm surge of 5 to 10 feet. On the southwest side, it's actually going to be slightly higher. Naples stretching down to Key West, 8 to 12 feet. This has to do with the drop-off. On the eastern side of Florida, it's a much sharper drop in the ocean when you're going from the beach. On the west side, it's much more gradual. That allows the water to accumulate up much higher than it would on the eastern side. So that's why you're going to get likely some much higher storm surge on that southwestern region. We have also added counties to hurricane watches and hurricane warnings. This is likely going to continue in the next 24 hours as we get get closer to landfall. So even if you don't see your particular county under a hurricane watch or a hurricane warning in Florida, doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. Landfall as of this point, Aaron, is expected to be early Sunday morning local time. However, many of these cities, including Naples, Miami, Key West, are likely going to start to see impacts from the outer bands of these storms in just a few hours from now.
All right, Allison, thank you very much. And we're going to be checking back in with you in just a few moments through the hour. Of course, as every tiny little change in this forecasted path makes such a huge difference. As we speak, the storm's crippling winds, the rains are already pummeling Cuba, and streets are flooded. Power is out. Look, this is a country that was ravaged by Hurricane Matthew just a year ago, reducing homes to piles of timber. Hurricane Matthew that sort of just skirted by Florida. Not going to happen this year. Patrick Ottman is out front live in Cuba in the midst of this. And Patrick, it has really started to arrive.
It is deteriorated almost in the last few minutes, Aaron. It went from a moment where we're getting ready for a live shot, my cameraman Scotty McWinney and I, and all of a sudden this, out of nowhere, this gust came in, the sky turned black. I didn't have a rain jacket on because we haven't had a drop of rain fall all day, and then just this torrent of water came and almost knocked me over. So just goes to show how quickly and how unexpectedly things can change. We are getting a much weaker version of this storm because it is far, far off the coast. Florida is not going to be so lucky. They're in for a direct hit, and they're going to see much worse conditions than what we're experiencing right now in Cuba.
And you know, when we're looking at the images here of what just happened to you a moment ago, Patrick, I think what you're pointing out is it just came upon you suddenly. It's not like as if you had any warning.
Absolutely. All day long, you know, we saw the weather change, but it just happened so quickly and so violently. So when the storm is coming at you, you shouldn't be outside. You shouldn't certainly be near the water. And you have to be prepared because it can change at a moment, and you can be just completely overwhelmed by the sheer fury and power of the storm.
All right, Patrick Ottman, thank you very much, reporting from Cuba, where, as we said, that storm is starting to impact right now as it gets ready for that turn to Miami and the Florida Keys. Thank you, Patrick. And I want to go now to Reed Timmer, AccuWeather storm chaser, who's witnessed firsthand, frankly, some of the most powerful storms in history. And Reed, I'm glad to have you back. You know, we just saw that image there of our reporter. He was standing there, and then all of a sudden, the wind and the rain, and literally unable to even put a coat on. Now that storm is going to turn into warmer water and head to the Keys. What is your biggest concern?
Yeah, this is an absolute worst case scenario for the Florida Keys. This westward shift since yesterday is just disastrous for South Florida. That center will likely cross right over the central part of the Keys. Maybe near Marathon is where that forecast track is right now. That would put all of the upper Keys in that most dangerous part of the storm, which is the right side of the hurricane, especially with the south to north moving storm. And then also Key West all the way there. There'll also be a storm surge from the other side, the Gulf of Mexico side as well. And the wind speed will likely be gusting to 190 miles an hour, stronger than any wind speed I've ever experienced in 20 years of storm chasing.
I mean, it's incredible. And when you think about Miami and all the construction cranes, they're built to withstand winds of 145. We're talking about gusts of 190. If that were to happen in Miami, I think people can imagine the horrific destruction that we could see. You have been inside major hurricanes, the biggest and the strongest that have ever happened in history here in the Atlantic. Katrina, Rita, Harvey. You've been in eye walls with 140-mile-an-hour winds. Why is Irma different, do you think, Reed?
Well, all of these storms are unique, but Irma is like all these storms, but much stronger. Stronger wind speeds, winds gusting to 190 miles an hour. At the Category 5, it sustained Category 5 status for longer than any other storm. It was the strongest in the Atlantic Ocean. And it still could intensify. It's still going to be moving over very warm waters. And also it's immense size. It's a lot larger, too, than a Hurricane Andrew, for example. So those impacts will stretch out further from the center. It's undergoing an eye wall replacement cycle right now, so it will likely have a larger eye when it comes impacting the Keys, which will also spread out the wind field and potentially the storm surge impacts as well. And it's unique track as well towards southwest Florida. This is an area that's especially prone to devastating storm surges near Naples, Fort Myers area. It's going to be, this is the absolute worst case scenario for South Florida.
Reed, you're right now, of course, in Key Largo, and I know you've seen the National Weather Service warning. This is as real as it gets. Nowhere in the Florida Keys will be safe. You still have time to evacuate. Obviously, you're a professional. This is what you do, but I know you have an exit plan. What is it?
Yeah, you always have to have an exit strategy when you're out here chasing these storms. You're constantly evaluating all scenarios as the forecast models change. I've got this instrument probe here that measures wind speed and the pressure fall, but it's unmanned. So we can deploy this on top of a bridge, fasten it down, and it will record the data without us having to be there. So if this thing does get way too strong, we could still leave tomorrow morning. It's very important for everybody to heed those evacuation warnings because this storm is absolutely deadly. And the National Weather Service saying that nowhere in the Florida Keys are safe is absolutely true.
All right, Reed, thank you very much. We wish you luck, and of course, I know you've got a plan and that it works and you are safe. Thank you. I want to go straight now to the mayor of Miami-Dade, Florida, Carlos Jimenez, who joins me now on the phone. And Mayor, look, that everyone, we're just here. This is going to be record breaking. Nowhere is safe, but there is still time to evacuate. Are people right now heeding that? Are enough people getting out?
Yes, I think we're having a record number of people going into our shelters. We've actually made provisions to open an unprecedented number of shelters with about 100,000 person capacity. So that's record breaking in itself. And so, yeah, I do believe that they're heeding the warning. I think also an unprecedented number of Miamians ended up leaving Dade County and going to further into other states. So normally we look at these hurricanes as part of our life, and we hunker down and we do okay. But this hurricane is something different. It's Category 5 has been Category 5 for a long time, and so people are really respecting it. Also, the images that came out of Houston, people are now that put an impression in them. So yes, we're getting prepared. We are prepared today. It was good to see that a lot of people have already done their preparations. Traffic was very light, which indicates to me that they had already done what they were going to do, and they're hunkering down for the storm.
For those who have not, and we're going to hear from some of them later this hour, but for those who have not, at what point is it too late, right? Because we all know one of the worst places to be, of course, is on the road when a storm hits. That could be a death warrant. At what point would you say, if you haven't gone, you need to stay?
Well, it's difficult to say. I mean, how many people make that decision at the last minute? Yeah. The more people that make that decision at the last minute, the more likely it is that you're going to be stuck in traffic and won't be able to get out. And so, but I know that a lot of people have already made that decision, have already left. The people that need to evacuate can evacuate, into a friend's house, coworkers, et cetera. Here in Miami-Dade County, we do have capacity for 100,000 people, but that's for us. And we've always said ours are the shelter of last resort. It's much better to be with friends and coworkers and family versus being in a shelter. Those that have no other place to go, that's who we shelter.
Mayor, where will you be?
We expect a lot of people to actually take advantage of our shelters.
I'm sorry, I asked. So where will you be? Obviously, you're going to be leading a lot of the disaster response. Where will you be when the storm strikes?
I'll be in the EOC, our Emergency Operations Center. And, when the storm hits, because as soon as the storm passes, then begins the process of recuperating and the restoration and also assessing damage, and then getting our folks to respond to those most in need, and then whatever it is that happened to Miami-Dade County, we'll make it right, and that's where I'm going to be. So that has to start from the first minute after the wind subside.
And Mayor, what is your biggest fear when you look at a storm here that is several times the size of Hurricane Andrew? It's going to get stronger as it hits the warm water off the coast of the Keys. What is your biggest fear?
Obviously, storm surge is the one that kills the most people. Is storm surge, and we have and the reasons for our evacuation precedent 600,000 people is because the storm surge maps we got from the National Hurricane Center. And so I want to make sure that those folks in those areas, especially those vulnerable areas along the coast, move out, because they could have some very deadly storm surge coming from this hurricane, which is very large and can push a large amount of water inland. Second thing I'm worried about, obviously, then is property damage. First thing, obviously, loss of life. But outside of that, storm surge is loss of life, and then property damage,
right.
And then our economic engines, the airport and the seaport, and then everybody else's livelihood. So yeah, there's a lot of things to worry about. I was a fire chief of the city of Miami 25 years ago when Hurricane Andrew hit, and that left a lasting impression on me. This one, I hope that somehow it turns off and goes back in the Atlantic and leaves us alone. But it doesn't appear that's going to happen. But we're prepared for the worst, and we're going to pray for the best.
Of course, everyone's hoping that all the modeling can say all at once. They can all converge on a horrific path, but that maybe it could be wrong. Thank you so much, Mayor Jimenez. I appreciate your time tonight. And next, escaping the storm. We're getting here in the last hours for people to head inland or to points north. Some, though, are refusing to leave despite the dire warnings. Why? Why are they staying put? Plus,
it looks more like it's going to be moving down through the center of the state, or
that's the scene.
Even a little bit closer towards
Island,
us,
that is the Bahamas.
as opposed to the East Coast. So that means higher winds here, and then also some more rain as well. The good news is, though, it moves out quickly. So by Monday at 8 a.m., you can see this storm is now a Category 1 and moving out away from us. So it's mainly going to be a Sunday night event. That's generally going to be the worst of it. That's where we're going to be seeing the highest winds and also the most rain. Really starting up Sunday afternoon and then pushing out as we head into Monday. As far as winds go, expect sustained winds across much of our area at 65 to 75 miles per hour. Again, hurricane strength winds are at 74. We'll likely see gusts above that, especially if the track is moving right along your area closer to the center where the strongest of the gusts are. Rainfall amounts 6 to 12 inches. At this point, it still looks like our inland counties will see the highest of the rainfall there, and then higher than normal tides possible with some coastal flooding during high tide.
Storm down to 150. Last hour was 150.
Good evening. Tonight, time is running short to prepare for Hurricane Irma as the storm's forecast track inches closer to the Bay Area. It is a threat that everyone needs to take very seriously. Let's begin our team coverage tonight with the very latest on Irma's track. Chief Meteorologist Steve Jervy is in the forecast center. It continues to kind of inch to the west, but I mean, the bottom line here is that all of Florida is in the crosshairs.
Yeah, and no doubt. And we were going to have effects anyway, Jen, as they moved a little to the west. It perhaps introduces a few Gulf saltwater effects to the west of us, but it's especially high wind, and we would have had to deal with that whether it had gone a little east or a little west. Certainly some very strong wind gusts are in the forecast, especially on Sunday. So that's the look at the storm now, with 155 mile per hour winds moving west at 12, interacting quite a bit with not the center of the storm, but the outer lying areas of the storm interacting with the landmass of Cuba. 155 mile per hour winds, though, according to the National Hurricane Center, not a significant effect on the storm itself. We'll see if that continues. Sunday at 2 a.m. Over the warmer waters of the Florida Straits and then pushing to the northwest. You can see on Sunday at 2 p.m. at 145 mile per hour winds. That would be near the Naples area. And just again to kind of zoom in on some of this area as I was talking about, get a better idea. You can see Sunday at 2 p.m. There's the Bay Area, and then that position on Sunday. We're right in between. So you can see passing roughly over Hardy, DeSoto, the western part of Polk County. The stronger winds likely then would be across the east and central part of Polk County, and especially Highlands County, not completely different than what we saw back in 2004. A hurricane threat is a hurricane warning for most of the areas south. You can see from Highlands County, Manatee County south, hurricane watch. It's just essentially timing 48 hours for the hurricane watch and 36 hours for the hurricane warning. There's the look at the satellite imagery and where it is. You can kind of see some outer bands kind of reaching out now toward the southeast part of Florida, about 300 miles to the southeast of Miami at this point. But with that forecast track shifting a little bit to the west, we're seeing fewer showers and also storm surge worries for portions of southeast Florida. That's almost shifting a little more central, and then southwest Florida, especially southwest facing beaches. This is actually Key West Doppler radar now picking up some of the outer bands.